um, working with families. And it was Wendy who spearheaded our refugee outreach project with the Afghan refugees in the East Bay, and has collaborated both with Bira and with Dr. Kofino, who is not able to be part of it today, and they will be presenting the program that has been in place for a couple of years. And as it goes forward, it's hoping, or the sponsor in the East Bay is Jewish Family Services, who would like it to also be replicated to the Ukrainian families if possible. So, um, thank you, Wendy, for being here, and you can maybe elaborate a little bit more on what I was saying.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I have a PowerPoint. I'm not sure if we want to.
You can pull it up.
Okay, we'll do the share screen. Okay. And let's see. Okay, I'm just having technical issues today. Let's see. Hang on.
Bira, do you think you can pull it up?
Oh, that would be amazing, Vera.
I will try. I haven't used Zoom very much recently, but when I did, the person sharing their screen had to have permission or be the host. Is that still true?
Yeah, I made you co-host.
Oh, excellent. Okay, let me see if I can pull that up. Thank you very much.
I guess in the meantime, I'll do my quick introduction. I've been working with Suzanne at the Child Development Center in San Francisco for 17 years. And I just, on the side, have always done a bunch of international work in terms of the trauma work that Suzanne brought up briefly. I did a lot of work in orphanages around the world. So I got to work with the children and caregivers in orphanages in China, in Peru, in India, and we've done some work in Brazil as well, where we did caregiver training and brought the children out into the communities via camps that I designed, often paired with the Paralympic Games as well as the FIFA World Cup Games. Creating opportunities for them to interact with international athletes like themselves with disabilities. So a lot of the work has been around, with children with disabilities and caregivers, and giving them insight about what their capabilities are, and understanding in our refugee group are the way that their brains and bodies can work together in response to trauma. Thank you so much, Bira, for bringing that up. So we started our refugee group in 2022 in response to the Afghan evacuations. And if you click to the next page.
Yeah, let me just, there we go.
That's kind of my brief introduction, and then Bira can do your brief introduction.
Wendy, I did before you were on.
So okay,
I think we can move on to the meat of what we were doing. And Suzanne also introduced Brianna in her absence, which was lovely. Brianna is an integral part of what we are able to offer to the Afghan refugee population in our workshop.
Okay. So this one is just the references that informed the development of the refugee group were based a lot on primarily Dr. Bruce Perry's work with neurosequential brain modeling, looking at the bottom-up brain development as well as how trauma kind of gets us stuck in the lower part of the brain. Using our OT background, I blended that with our body-based approaches, which also intersected with a lot of the reading that I read from Dr. Vanderkolk, who The Body Keeps the Score, as well as Dr. Dan Siegel, who does like the brain modeling with children about the upstairs and downstairs brain. And Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris's like ACE studies about childhood adversities and its impact on brain and health. The occupational therapy layer is around the sensory integration piece about how our bodies and our senses, the different types of inputs that we provide to the brain, help to move from the brainstem up to the midbrain cerebellum and allow access to the prefrontal cortex, and layers it into the trauma responses that the central nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and how it activates. And so we kind of blend that together, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next slides. But Suzanne was simultaneously starting work with you all and was such a strong proponent and advocate for our program. And that's how we were able to get it to run at the Child Development Center with her support and her relationships with philanthropy. That's you.
Yes. So what, and I'm speaking on behalf of Wendy doing a lot of this work. So Wendy, feel free to jump in if I get something wrong. But Wendy looked into where the Afghan refugee population tended to be resettling after the 2021 evacuations, and it was Fremont and Sacramento. And eventually we came to learn that the East Bay also was a hub, and that JFCS, Jewish Family and Children's Services of the East Bay, was doing a big lift in terms of working on the very critical things for families as they arrive, housing, legal connections, getting the children enrolled in education, getting parents any education they needed in order to be able to eventually get work, and mental health support for those families. Jumping ahead a tiny bit, the families that we have in the workshops are often here less than 2 months or less, and they have already been connected with those vital services before we see them, which I always find fascinating and incredible. The trajectory for us engaging with JFCS was we reached out to them in October of 2020, and they were delightfully interested and honestly communicated how overwhelmed they were with the numbers of refugees coming and the incredible needs of tapping all of their resources for the things like housing and food security, and that they rightfully so identified as needing to be handled before we could consider this collaborative venture. However, they stayed connected and we stayed connected, and we were able to begin working directly with them to better formulate this workshop in February of 2022. Sorry.
So the program is a full-day workshop, and using the therapeutic approaches that I mentioned of Dr. Bruce Perry. It's a lot of R's. We have regulate. We have to have a regulated nervous system before you can move into the middle brain for the relation. And then the reasoning is the frontal cortex. Our morning activities, the families come in, we do a lot of rapport building. We do like parachute games where we do introductions, and then we dive into so we always incorporate movement and fun. So like we do a huge, massive parachute with all the families around, and We get to know each other. We make sure to have movement and laughter and like connection. We provide this this folder. The content is primarily from the Wholehearted School Counseling Group about your brave, hardworking brain, and it teaches about the stress response. So we dive in with a lot of developmentally appropriate content, because our children are from the families have like they bring their entire families. So we have kids that have come that are like 2 years old to like 17 years old. The younger children are brought because they often don't have caregivers to otherwise attend. So JFCS provides additional personnel to support with like making sure that the younger children have a caregiver to support the rest of the family to engage. And then this content is actually has shown to be quite effective for even our youngest kids down to 5 and 6 years old, because it's quite playful. They learn about the stress response, about the fight, flight, and freeze, and how that looks in their bodies, and understanding we talk about the brain as having a protective porcupine in the lower brainstem. We talk about how the protective porcupine is their friend, and how it helps them when they're in danger, which they've gone through many dangerous and high stress events in order to get to the point of resettling in the Bay Area. So we recognize that and validate their experiences. And so they really resonate with this protective porcupine. They all each get a little toy to have, and having something to hold tactily. This is a very, very soft and small handheld toy. They really connect with that throughout the day. They learn about the brain structures, and they do a cut and paste activity of like learning that where the protective porcupine lives in their brain, and where the thoughtful turtle is in their brain as well. So they do arts and like this art and craft cut and paste neurology lesson in the beginning of the morning. And then we also do, as always, incorporate movement. So we're doing games where they're running from side to side of the room, like trying to sort through who's in charge of their brain, whether it's the thoughtful turtle or the protective porcupine. And so they really start understanding their own bodies and brain and what's happening in response to perceived danger versus real danger, and what their responses are when their thoughtful turtle is the boss of them versus the protective porcupine. Then we move into the lunchtime, where we spend we put a lot of thought into providing cultural food for them. In the past, in the very, very beginning, we had, basic pizza, but we found that they really resonated and just warmed, and it was just such a communal experience when they got to have their own foods. And we've had we've had Afghan restaurants donate food for the workshop. We've had a Afghan flatbread manufacturing company who happens to be in the East Bay also donate. So we've had a lot of community involvement with restaurants, bakeries. They've all been supportive in providing for the experience for our families. And then in the afternoon, and also over lunch, the way we do it is that we separate our parents with our child psychologist, Brianna, so that they have a safe, protected container to speak freely about the trauma experiences that they have been and continue to go through, while Bira and I stay with the children to help them facilitate their relating to each other as well. And then the afternoon segment, we work a lot on experiential body-based coping tools that ranges from things like a touch game that's paired with this storybook, Pizza Pizza, where there's a lot of laughter and joy as like we have the parents pretend that the children are pizzas and they're making body pizzas out of the children's bodies, where we do like pats and rubs and squeezes to apply pizza sauce and cheese, and they shout out different toppings that they want on their body pizzas. And then the fun part is that the children often, we turn it around and can turn the touch play back to the parents, where the children are putting pizza sauce and cheese and silly toppings on their parents. And so there's a lot of connecting touch for the families at that point in the afternoon, along with music and movement and all of that, which we'll talk about as well. Sorry. Okay, next page.
Okay, so we have more R's for you. So we have the R's already, and then these R's, Wendy's already touched on just by describing what we do, but it's important that we make the activities we choose relevant, rewarding, repetitive, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, rhythmic, relational, and respectful. So Wendy has already touched on this a bit, but we'll go into it a little bit more here. So as we were creating this workshop, or at least now it's the one-day workshop. Originally, it was afternoons, but now it's the one-day workshop. And we needed to learn a fair bit about Afghan culture in order to keep it relevant, as well as remain respectful of the cultural expectations and norms. JFCS has a fair number of people working for them that are themselves Afghans of varying length of time who have been here. Our main touch point, Nargis, has been here for, I think, over 20 years. And so therefore, it's a wonderful resource in that she knows what we are up against and can work with, and all of the wonderful resources of the Bay Area, as well as what the families are experiencing as they are newcomers, and the cultural expectations. We have, for relevance, we also have an interpreter come, as well as Nargis spends the full day with us and she interprets additionally. So we have, when we split off, we have an interpreter for both the adults and for the children. We have brought in musicians from that region of the world and he was able to play traditional songs, and you could kind of see, in particular, the moms' faces light up as they heard songs that were so closely tied with their cultural identity. That was very well received, as well as we had the Afghan Student Organization from Berkeley come in, and they did some culturally relevant spoken word, as well as applied henna for the group. For rewarding, certain things are intrinsically rewarding and somewhat transcend cultural experience in terms of children enjoying movement, and movement being a connecting factor among people. There are the things that the children and families take home. Wendy referenced the protective porcupine plushie, which is always a hit. And they have the folder of materials that help them recall what they learned in the workshop. As well as the experiential activities that we do, such as Pizza Pizza, in which they can go home and practice those things as well. And yoga, we've also done many different varieties of yoga that is also generally a very positively regarded activity done in session. Repetitive patterned rhythmic activities support regulation of core neural networks. So we know this from our OT training. We know this from Dr. Perry, and therefore that has guided us in the types of things that we look to do. We've done some partner yoga, which as you push and pull on somebody has some rhythmic capacity to it. And that is, and as well as some breathing activities meant to be obviously repetitive and hopefully rhythmic to help reset their nervous system. Rhythmic, this bullet point just goes through a little bit in more detail what we just said. Relational, that piece about.
I'm gonna check, go in on the tactile, like tie in the rhythmic piece real quick. So for our the layering in of occupational therapy, sensory processing approaches, and tying it in with Dr. Bruce Perry's bottom-up brain modeling, the pizza game, it's in the first thing after lunch, and that's the part that we teach the families about how the touch input of their body comes up to the lowest brainstem part to release dopamine. Tactile input and dopamine are very connected, and it supports like calming down a reactive brainstem. Brianna does a great job about talking about the brainstem and how it doesn't have an understanding of time, and like it can kind of jump back and forth between the traumatic event and the present and make these connections. And the tactile input actually sends the dopamine to the lower brainstem to help cool down that reactivity such that we can move up and not and like have that separation of the trauma from the current present time. Granted, they're also still continuing to experience trauma, but the tactile input is the important entry point a lot of times for calming down the sympathetic nervous system responses. And then we always then layer on heavy work, proprioception, that pushing and pulling in the joints and muscles, release the serotonin. This is just a quick, brief neuro that we actually, the families really give feedback that they valued the understanding of what was happening in their brains and in their children's brains, and the children seem to get it too. So the serotonin piece is the proprioception, and then after that, that moves you up a little bit more to we get the rhythmic movement, where whether it's like rocking back and forth in a partnered yoga, like row your boat, or that type of rhythm and vestibular input is like then the next higher up part of the brain, where it releases histamine, and which is helps to organize and like orient the attention. And then so we're moving up the brainstem with the different sensory experiences that provide the neurochemistry to move up in the brain work as well. We also do some breath work of learning how to do diaphragmatic breathing, which gives you a sympathetic nervous system, a parasympathetic nervous response, by teaching the families to really focus on the extended exhale. And we do this with them having the protective porcupine take a ride on their belly and noticing the porcupine gently going up as they feel their bellies full. That diaphragmatic breathing is important versus a lot of times they're stuck in the chest and in a more shallow breath. So we really break that down over the course of the afternoon to really get them feeling and understanding how their bodies are tools. Sorry, that's the rhythmic part. And then
thank you, Wendy. And I will move on to the relational aspect, which we touched on a bit, but I think we've already covered how the parents have an opportunity to be free to speak their mind while their kids are in another room, and to speak it to Brianna, who is a child psychologist and can help them with, kind of what signs and symptoms are they seeing in their kids, and potentially connect dots that the poor sleep or the really reactive kiddo is related to what they've all been through, while holding and acknowledging that the parents are also going through that same traumatic trajectory. However, among the kids, it is a time in our day with less structure, but opportunity for engagement as much or as little as they feel up to in that time frame. So we offer things like big format Jenga and Legos and also just some unstructured downtime. And we see the kids connecting with each other. We have even had situations where families that didn't know each other before, who are sharing a relatively common experience, end up exchanging contact information and staying connected after the workshop, which is a lovely relational outcome of the workshop. And respectful, as we mentioned already, is being very careful to try and be culturally aware, because the most tricky aspect is you may accidentally be culturally disrespectful out of lack of knowledge. So JFCS has been integral with that, and allowing us to ask our questions and try and be as respectful as we can be. Wendy?
This is just a brief overview of the evolution and working with JFCS. It started weekly in the community. We delivered it in different places from their local masjid, their worship place. We've done it in their community places like that, or the library, community spaces, as well as JFCS. Their conference rooms have ultimately ended up being the most accessible for everyone. So we've done it over weekly series initially, but it became challenging because the families, one of the major obstacles was transportation. We were relying on JFCS community volunteers to transport them weekly through rush hour traffic to the local library. They were coming from all over the Bay Area. So some of them were traveling quite far or just with rush hour traffic. And that was a huge ask of the volunteers. So it ended up evolving over time into a full day workshop that's offered quarterly. We found that this works really well. We just really get to dive deep over the course of the hours, and the relationship builds. And it's just much more feasible with the barriers to transportation. And of course, just scheduling with the rest of the families, children and work and all of that. It worked out best as a full day workshop. Yeah.
All right, so the cultural considerations and community engagement. We've talked about some of this, quite a bit of it actually. The one thing we didn't talk about is, and this is going back to when we were first building the program, we were told to expect that there will be a wide variety, and we should plan for limited literacy of the women. We were told that primarily this will be women with their children, that the men would be less likely to be present, as well as the women may not feel comfortable opening up if we had men as part of the special presentations or whatnot. Some of that was we encountered women that were well educated. Some of the moms came here as a doctor, and I don't know that we've encountered, to our knowledge, anybody who had no literacy. And in fact, the children oftentimes had studied English before they came here, especially the ones that were between like 10 years old and up. And the younger ones, if they had been here for just a couple months, had picked it up super duper fast by going to school. So those were some of the things that we needed to factor in. We were told to expect there to be a preference for in-person verbal communications over the digital platforms, primarily with the literacy piece in mind, as well as technology literacy, that could have been a limiting factor. We did have at least one family where the father is who brought the children. And I don't remember the details because that was way back in the beginning. But at least for that group, it did not seem to hinder the other mothers in their participation. So that was lovely, but it is primarily mothers with their children. I think we have touched on the rest. There was one piece that, Wendy, I don't recall what slide it was from, but we have not yet talked about that one of the respectful things that we needed to do was not have this be us as the knowledge keepers and them as the knowledge needers or seekers. So Wendy was extraordinarily careful in our design of this to make sure that we minimize the power differential feeling as much as possible to make it as open to the receptive to the community as it could be. Here's some photos.
Yeah, that's the children doing their cut and paste activity for their brain, learning about the protective porcupine and the thoughtful turtle. And that's our musician Pesam, who was amazing with his beautiful, like he brought an array of different instruments that are local to not only that Afghanistan, but to the general region. And the children would get a chance to play on his instruments. And he was just so engaging and also sharing his refugee settlement story, which was really connecting for him and the families. And this was one of the settings that we held the workshop. This is at a yoga studio. So like we've been all over the community, and this was a particularly fun setting where it was a space that really brought the families together. And these are the resources that informed our program. And this is our last slide. Are we doing questions, or that's the end of our presentation?
Okay, yes, we will take questions. First of all, thank you.
Thanks.
Wonderful presentation. If you stop sharing, Bira, we can see each other better, and let's take comments and questions from the audience. Jackie, you need to unmute yourself. Jackie, you're muted.
I'm so excited about this presentation because it's a model for any cultural organization we could put together to welcome any people that would be coming as immigrants to our United States and world. It's complete. It has science, it has the arts, it has humanity in it. So I think that I've never seen a complete short-term presentation that covered everything. Wendy and Bira, thank you so much. Where does trust, I mean, this is a general question, when you're running a program like this, do you have to deal with the trust of the actual participants that were in your program? You know, did they engage comfortably at first, not, or maybe grew into it? Because there's a lot to cover, you know, with all the science part anyway.
In the morning, you can definitely see that some families in their faces are like a little questioning and hesitant. An interesting thing about trust is that from the first to the second and third rounds of families were saying, we heard from families in the community that this is a really great thing to attend, and they told us to come. And I think that word of mouth within the community has been a huge piece of the trust that they come in with. Sometimes even with that, understandably, you can still see some hesitation, primarily in the grown-up faces. The children are often so warm. But we've had families that come and said, oh, we heard from this, or we've even had, like the central family come and then they're like, oh, we're the aunts and the cousins and the other extended families that heard, and we wanted to come because they told us it was great. But we build the trust over the course of the morning, that rapport building time with the movement. And
that was quick work, because I've been finding out, working with different cultures in New York City, which is massive diversity, that the men coming to therapy were like, they want to stay in the background, never show up for family meetings, because they feel you're trying to indoctrinate them into our culture. And that is hard to get over. And we work on it, but it's one of those things. I'm wondering if you incorporated anything that covers that, the word indoctrination. Because I think what you did was you bring in their culture into the presentations, which is acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add, before addressing that question, Jackie, is that I don't want to miss the opportunity to say that JFCS reach out to families before they are in front of us is, I think, a really big piece of that. So these are the people that they already trust, who have gotten them secure housing, what they need, connections for what they needed for both legal needs and their children's education, food needs. And so they have already built trust with the JFCS members, who are also largely Afghans. So they have that connection as well. So even once they walk in the door, they don't yet have one-on-one experience as a reason to trust us, but they heard from a trusted resource in their community, as well as through JFCS, that this was a positive experience. And I think that's huge. To answer your question about indoctrination, we haven't approached that, Wendy, would you say?
Mm-mm.
It's just a fear that anyone that's going to a different culture thinks we want to make sure that they're going to be just like us. Right. And what you did with the food and the music says probably not. But there are people that are naysayers, no matter what organization they'll be. Thank you.
Peter, you have a question?
Peter,
then Megan.
It's not so much a question as a comment. I was really blown away by this presentation. First of all, by the gentleness and sure-footedness of the programs you implement, and also how this is a multi-systemic approach to the whole family and the whole community, and bringing in the example of this immigrant from the same culture that's integrated and been there for some years and is quite settled. So you've got the whole spectrum, and the way the parents wanted to partake and engaged in conversations with you is beautiful. So it's wonderful that it all sort of came together, and your dedication is very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Megan?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your such important work, and I learned so much from that, and the cultural considerations that you've undertaken. My question is that translation of knowledge that they get from your amazing workshop to practice. Is there any follow-up with the families, with the young people, to see how are they using the strategies like the breath work, and are they using the language that you've taught them around the brain and everything? So I was just curious around the follow-up and that translation of what they've learnt from you and with you, and to get from that collective knowledge.
So one thing that we do, which we did not touch on here, is that when the families arrive, a big part of what the interpreters are doing is talking through a pre-workshop questionnaire with the families that gets a sense of what they were hoping to get out of it, what the experience they have with these types of things, as well as at the end of the day, a post-workshop questionnaire, what they liked the best, what they think they might use at home, how this might change their experience. However, I think the longer term, 6 weeks out, what are you still using, is not something we have been able to fold in yet. So that would be wonderfully informative if we could venture to do that as well sometime in the future.
No, that's wonderful. No, thank you so much for sharing your amazing work. And I was checking out the resources as you were sharing. It's just great. So thank you so much for your amazing work that you're doing.
Okay, we have time for one more question or comment.
I would love
Anoki.
could I just briefly say, Brian,
Yes.
in this world with all of what's going on, I found this, what a hopeful and beautiful contribution you're making. I feel it's so inspiring to hear. It's what human beings can do when they decide to do something positive that's going to touch other people. You have just created a beautiful, beautiful program, and I think we'll all take it with us as we go forward, thinking about it as an example of what's possible. So thank you so much for all that you've done.
Anoki?
So I actually wanted to share that my full-time job is doing emotional support for trauma-affected refugees. I'm not a licensed mental health provider, but we do this intervention called PM Plus. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's Problem Management Plus, and we do work with a lot of Afghan refugees and others across the world, like Ukraine, Haiti, Latin America. And I was just wondering if you have I know you have resources for refugees, but if you have any resources for those who are trying to support refugees, and how I can be, because I'm constantly learning how to be, more culturally informed. So if you have any resources that would, help someone who's trying to do emotional support, but also anything you could share that could inform my work with these refugees.
Wendy, I'm going to defer to you on this one.
Yeah.
It's okay if you don't. I was just wondering.
This is really, fortunately, a family philanthropy came forward with what they hoped for a program. And so in both Wendy and Bira and Brianna Cafino, I mean, everybody is got full-time jobs. So, I mean, we do our absolute best in trying to formulate the program to move it forward. Anything further is a dream, and we would love to do it. And it's not just funding, but it's time as well. So possibly in the future, but our focus right now is, to be able to continue the program in our area and continue to learn from it. So it's that's a work in progress, but the model has been, they've done, Wendy and Bira and Brianna have done a phenomenal job, as I think all of you have seen, in putting together this model. And the families for each quarter presentation are different. So they try to reach as many families as possible. And I know as of the last one, there's a wait list for the next one as well. So I appreciate it, but there unfortunately are some time limitations as well.
Yeah, of course.
We are now at the end of our meeting. I'd like to thank Suzanne for facilitating this presentation. And I want to thank Bria and Wendy for a really outstanding presentation. The elements that really struck me were the culturally appropriateness appropriateness of the way you designed that program. The use of parent-child exercises, the OT elements that you brought in terms of your own profession, and the flexible way you adapted the program from over 6 weeks to you realize you needed to have a different format. That kind of adaptation is what indicates really a superior program. And this presentation, I'm going to invite you folks to come to Oxford. You need to come to Oxford and present that and publish it in our proceedings. So you will get an invitation. If you're not able to come this year, you can come anytime in the future. But this was a model program, and we thank you for allowing us to record it. We're planning to place it on our Healing Lectures series so that other people can learn from it. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.